So, welcome back for this week's episode of Mortal Realms Monday. For this week's episode, or issue I should say, we didn't get any models. This is the issue 29 that came with the Baneblade Brown and the non-oil. So for this video for you guys, I've decided to paint up the Branchwych from the premium kit that subscribers get with the Mortal Realms subscription. Direct from Hatchet. So first of all, I've gone ahead and painted or primed the model in Abaddon Black. This was brushed on as at the time of assembling and painting this. The weather wasn't too good and I was not able to spray it with the can, so I just went in with a couple of thin down coats of Abaddon Black and primed it. Alright, so for the first layer of paint on here, I'm taking 3 parts Rhinox hide, and into that I've mixed 1 part of Screamer pink, just to give it a little bit more of a sort of reddish, purplish tone to the shadows and the undertone of the colours we're going to put over the top of this. So I go ahead and apply this over all of the Branchwych sort of, the wooden areas, so obviously leaving out her hair and her cloth that's hanging down the front. So I'll get on with this and we'll catch back up in just a bit. Alright, so next up I'm taking some Doombull brown and I'm just going to dry brush this over the whole model. Now for this I'm using a makeup brush. I'm not one for going out and buying super expensive paint brushes and things like that if I can find a decent cheap alternative that does the same job. So for now I'm using makeup brushes. The brush is slightly damp. I'm not removing all of the paint straight away, as I do want this to cover the majority of the model, just leaving those sort of deepest recesses and like sort of undercut areas with that sort of redder brown mix. So the idea of painting this model with predominantly dry brushing is I wanted something that I could get done within about half an hour. This isn't going to be a award-winning piece or anything, but this is to show you that you don't have to go super complicated with hundreds of paints and fine details and everything else, just to get some models on the table for playing. But this does still get a nice end result. So I'll get on with dry brushing this and we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, so for the next colour I'm now using Tuskgor fur, and I'm just going to focus this a little more on the upper portion of the model, and anywhere that is going to catch more light. So obviously around her horns, her head, the tops of her arms, and then the top of the thighs sticking out. You'll notice at this point that I've now attached the staff, and this is so that I can get that highlight in, blending over that and matching in. Obviously we've got the colour behind it, sort of the shadow and things like that, and we don't want to be applying highlight behind where the staff is. So I've gone ahead and fitted that there so that I can get the highlights in the right places. Okay, so next up I've mixed some Baneblade brown into the Tuskgor fur, just to get it slightly lighter and change the tone slightly towards that more sandy looking brown, which is what we'll be using for our final highlight at the end. So this is just sort of setting up for that. Again, this is all dry brushing. I do keep the bristles on the brush slightly damp, just by obviously I'm using a wet palette here, so I'm just touching some of the paper where there's a little bit more water seeped through, and that just damps the brush enough to you know, stop those sort of that chalky effect. So you can see here I've now just gone into the Baneblade brown neat without cleaning the brush, and again just going back over, again focusing just on the top of the model here. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, so I'm now going in with some Screamer Pink and using this as the base coat for her ponytail that she has down her back, her hair, and this cloth piece at the front. This looks like it is made of leaves, and I decided that I want this Branchwych to have a bit more of a fantasy theme, so I decided to go with the more sort of purple pink flowers, or leaves I should say, to represent that. And as we have the Screamer Pink used in that undertone, you know, it just ties the piece together, ties the colours together, and obviously allows us to use a more minimal palette. So I'll get on with this and then we'll be back in just a bit. And welcome back. So I've now mixed in some white Scar to the Screamer Pink just to lighten it up slightly, and I'm now just basically again dry brush highlighting the hair and the loincloth, just picking up all those raised edges. The top I'm pretty much colouring or painting, leaving the underside a little bit darker with that original Screamer Pink. Okay, so for the blade and the worm, as well as the little swirly markings on her, I wanted to contrast something, a cooler colour up against the sort of those warmer colours of the pinks and the you know, the purpley browns. So what I've done here is a mix of 2 parts Sotek green and 1 part Sybarite green, or Sybarite green I think it's called, and I've just obviously mixed them together and going over the blade here, applying 2 to 3 thin layers to get a nice even coat. And like I said, I went ahead and also did this with the worm. I'm not sure the name of it, but the thing that's going to sit on her shoulder. So I'll get on with that, and we'll be back in just a bit to see how we can make this blade pop out a little bit more. Okay, so I've now mixed in a little bit of white Scar with that Sotek green mix, and I'm just again dry brushing this over the worm here in a downward sort of motion, just to pick off the edges and the scales and things like that. He's got this sort of stepped carapace piece down his back, so obviously I want to try and pick off each of those pieces as we come down the model. And for the blade, I've got a just a torn off piece of sponge here. This came with a cheap Halloween makeup kit, so any old sponge would do. And I've dipped this into the lighter Sotek green mix. This is what I just used for dry brushing the worm. And removing some of the paint, I'm going in and dabbing this down the blade. I'm concentrating it a little bit more to the tip, so that it's a little bit more solid colour. And then as I work my way down the blade, I'm trying to get it a little bit more sparse and spread out and not quite so obvious. And what this is going to do is just give that stippled effect, just sort of a little sparkle to the blade. I'm now mixing in a little bit more white, and I'll go ahead and speckle that over the top, or stipple that over the top. Again, concentrating a little bit more on the tip of the blade than the bottom. So obviously just picking off the underside a little bit here. This is just to, like I say, to give the blade just a little bit of a a glowy effect rather than just a smooth blade. So I'll get on with this and then we'll come back for the next step. Okay, so I'm now taking that slightly lightened up Sotek, and I'm just edge highlighting the uppermost part of the worm here along his scales and some of his sort of hard ridge lines. And I also did this the same with the blade, lining around the cutout swirl part, and then obviously the edges of the blade itself. And obviously this is just to pick out the sharpest edges, ready for throwing a wash over each of the parts of the model. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back for that step. Okay, so these are the three shades from Citadel that I'm going to be using: the Reikland Fleshade, the Drakenhoff Nightshade, and the Carroburg Crimson. So starting with the Carroburg Crimson, just going to give it a shake here. This is going to apply obviously over the Screamer Pink areas, so the bit down the sort of the loincloth down the front of her, and obviously making sure to get the back of it as well, and her hairpiece. Now, because I went over this with some extreme highlighting on the dry brushing, what this is going to do is tone that down slightly as well as darken up those recesses. I'm not going to let it pool anywhere in particular. I just want to get a little bit of a collection up on the, you know, each of the recesses and where pieces are overlapping and things like that. But I don't want it pooling enough that it's going to run down the model as the model is sitting and drying, or collecting in any, you know, large pools. This is just to add some very quick shading to, you know, keep this as quick and easy as possible. So once that's done, I'll then move on to the Drakenhoff Nightshade, that's the one, and apply this over the blade itself. And what this will do, this will just blend in that stippling a little bit. Again, I don't want it pooling, so anywhere that it pools too much, I'll just pick it up and push it around. I would have preferred a more turquoise mix to this, but I didn't want to go and, you know, try and mix up the right colour shade using blues and greens and whatnot. So the blue, it does work enough because it's got that turquoise undertone. All this is really going to do is just blend that stippling in and just add some shading into the recesses. It's not going to change the look too much, as it is a shade a little bit more than a glaze. So obviously that's just the blade and the worm here. Same thing with the worm on his carapace, trying to get it to sort of collect up a little bit where the pieces overlap, but not letting it pool up too many on or too much on any of the flat surfaces. You'll also notice a small step that I skipped on the video quickly, was just painting his mandibles and his little legs that he's got with some Abaddon black. Nothing too complicated there. You could, if you wanted to, throw a little bit more detail on, just highlighting with a little bit of grey or something. But just trying to keep this nice, quick and simple, effective enough for tabletop quality. And then finally the Reikland Fleshade. Now I chose this over the Agrax Earthshade as it does have some reddish tint to it, and obviously going with the sort of the purple and the warmer colours on the wood, I felt that this was a better choice over the Agrax. So again, same thing, applying this all over the model. This is going to tone down those brighter highlights slightly. So once dry, we will go back over and just a quick dry brush over the top. But this will obviously darken up in those recesses. Now, at this point, you can see that I'd got in and put the turquoise into the engravings. You could leave them out and do that after this is dried, but if you are careful enough, you can go around those and it doesn't affect it at all, or you can go back in and apply them afterwards. But like I say, just get a nice even coat of this, no pooling, just get it into those recesses and those shadow areas, and then let it dry for about 5-10 minutes, as it is just a thin wash and there's no real pooling. About 10 minutes and this is good to go, but obviously do make sure that it is fully dry before carrying on. Right, so now that that has fully dried, I'm just taking a very light dry brushing of Rakarth flesh, just to pick off those highlights again, just over the horns or the antlers and the top of the model. The lower parts of the model, the highlights are there enough to give some shadowed highlights, if that makes sense. You're still going to get some highlight down there, but obviously we'll just put a little bit of this just to help them pop out a little bit more. And there we have it, guys. Nice quick simple base thrown on there. That's just some PVA glue with some modelling flock thrown down, and then once that dried, I put a small amount of PVA glue to make this the path going between her legs, and threw down some very fine sand on that. Let that dry. A thin coat of PVA over the top. Let that dry, and then some scrag brown dry brushed with some Rakarth flesh on the mud part, and then just a couple of tufts of static grass just to finish it off there. So in total, I think this took me a little over half an hour, probably about 35 minutes or so, including the drying time of the shades. So like I say, nothing super complicated, but enough to get a nice looking model to the tabletop quick. You can also replicate this super easy throughout all your models that came in the subscription kit, the premium kit. Nice easy paint job to throw down quickly. So thanks a lot for joining me, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that thumbs up button, as it obviously helps me get noticed a little bit more through YouTube. If you enjoyed the video and what the channel is currently putting out, hit that subscription button if you're not already subscribed. Join the community, help the channel grow, and ding that little bell for notifications of when further videos go live. Obviously every Monday we have the Mortal Realms Monday, and Thursdays, Fridays, the Indomitus videos for Warhammer 40k. So until next time, guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.